My Gavanen Melonin, and well met indeed. I am Arachir Galadirthan, head of the modding team behind Divide and Conquer, and welcome to another developer diary for Divide and Conquer. Our next version, version 4, Eriador Rises, is the now title of the next expansion. Now, there's a fair few bits to get through today, so this might be relatively lengthy, but as ever, there is a link in the description which will jump to the battle map if you're not interested in the campaign changes, because these can be a little tedious, I appreciate. Also, something I should have done in all of these before, and I don't know why, but the changelog for all of the works that we do is available for everyone to see as we make the changes, but it isn't publicised as much as I should have done, so it is now in the link of this description as well. So because I don't cover every single statistical change, so if you want to go and have a full read of everything we've changed, the option is available in the link in the description. It takes you to a Dropbox file and you can just read it online or download it if you'd rather and read it that way. The choice is yours. I don't know if it lets you download it, actually. But anyway, without any further ado, we're going to start with changes to the evil faction specifically, then changes to the good factions, and then generic campaign map changes, and then we'll jump over to the battle map, where today we have an awful lot to see. So, starting us off on the campaign is Moria. Moria's trash tier units have now been reduced in availability in an attempt to make Moria stronger. Previously, their snagger units would make up about 90% of all of their forces, and so we've tried to cull that by reducing the replenishment rate of the snagger, the availability from 3 units per barracks down to 2. Obviously, that replenishes over time, but and also they can now recruit their mountain orc hunters, which were previously only available in the Misty Mountains. They are now available in any mountain or hill settlement, so they are vastly more available than they were before. Also, when you're playing as Moria, the army that Balin now spawns with is considerably stronger, and we've tested this with the help of our beta testers, most predominantly Orc Lover, and Balin's army will now actually really be a fight, and I believe Orc Lover suggested that if you're not really at the top of your game, you may well actually lose Eastern Moria to Balin's expedition now, whereas before it was a foregone conclusion. You would never lose the Balin battle. It was so easy to prepare for and defeat, whereas now you're given a little less warning that it's coming, and when it does come, it's much stronger. Because the point is that you are actually supposed to lose it to Balin and then claim it back heroically, but if you have got your wits about you, you should be able to fend his army off. Moving over to Dole Guldur, as the AI, they now get Dantalad, which is shown here because I've already done turn 1 for you. Let me just turn this back on. They now get Dantalad in the turn 1 auto expansion, which is this vast province here, Emunmuil. The Brownlands, of course, also. Now, the purpose of this is to stop Mordor going into Rovanion, which they were doing so much. And whilst that might sound like a good idea that Mordor goes into Rovanion, in truth, it was useless, because Mordor is powerful enough to fight Gondor and Dorwinion, and it just absolutely annihilated Dorwinion, and also meant that Gondor actually had a bit of an easier time, and Mordor sort of, sometimes, was struggling. So even though they theoretically can fight Gondor and Dorwinion, it took their focus totally off of Gondor, and they suffered for it. So Dol Guldur get Dantalad now to block Mordor in, basically. Ost-in-Gael, the town here, Town of the Stars, is now an orc village, not an elven village, and roads have been added to this region. This is obviously the central province, or the Narrows of Mirkwood, and you can now transgress it. Transgress? That's not what I mean, is it? Traverse, that's what I'm after. You can now get through this region quicker than you could before. Mordor's also had some changes. If you are not Mordor, so for the AI Mordor only, they get a much lower King's Purse bonus. So they've lost about 600 gold coins as standard at the start of the game. And the same treatment of their trash has occurred as well. So their trash units are now less readily available. Their replenishment rate is down, and they're down from 3 units to 2. This is the Orc Scouts, Orc Band, and Orc Raiders. So your trash tier is a little less readily available. If you are playing as Mordor, the Nazgul are now sent off map, and they will return at turns 10, 20, 30, 40, and then the Witch King comes back at turn 50. But this is only for the player. For anyone else, so if you are playing as anyone other than Gondor, the Nazgul are simply locked using a trait, and they will just stand there and then when those turns hit, so 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, they unlock and they will then come into play. So it does look a little bizarre if you toggle Fog of War because they'll be standing around here forever. Now, unfortunately, that is a necessary cause because we found that if we send the Nazgul off map for the AI, when they return, they simply do nothing. They stand still for the rest of the game and they never move anywhere. So we just couldn't do it. It was not possible. So instead, they have to be locked for the AI. But you, as a player, they'll be sent off-map, so you won't be wondering why your Nazgul is standing around Mordor doing sod all. They just won't be there, and then they will slowly return. Speaking of the Nazgul, something of heresy I appreciate is we are going to rename them. The names that they currently have of all the Nazgul, except Khamul and the Witch King, are taken from the Middle-earth role-playing game, or role-playing project, I think it's called, which is a card game from some time ago. And I've always wanted DaC to have very much its own take on lore when the lore is interpretable, and the Nazgul are one such thing. I didn't really want us to continue using names when they're another Middle-earth game's names, basically. And I wasn't all that keen on that, so we are going to rename them. But what we're also going to do is give them a little bit of a backstory. Now, of course, it will not be lore accurate because we know absolutely nothing about the Nazgul, so it's entirely made up. But it'll just give basically a reason behind their names. The Middle-earth role-playing project does the same thing with its named Nazgul, but we are going to rename them, and then we're going to write backstories for them. And Matt's one of the highest ranking members of the Discord, and someone who's been around the Discord for a long time, did make a he laughed at me basically because I was moaning about how Shadow of Mordor made the Nazgul Helm, Hammerhand and Isildur, which I think is absolutely ridiculous, and then he mocked me and called me a hypocrite because then now I'm creating my own Nazgul names. But at least our Nazgul are not going to be based on real people that they absolutely never could have been, which is just stupid. But anyway, the Nazgul will get new names, they'll get little backstories, and when they spawn for you as Mordor, you'll get a little pop-up historic event message that tells you their names. And you get to read a little bit about their backstory. For Dol Guldur Nazgul, they won't be sent off map, you'll get them straight away. But when the first time you click on each of the Nazgul, you'll get, again, the little pop-up message that will tell you who they are and a little bit about their name, etc. It's just a little bit of fun, isn't it? I mean, we might as well create a bit more backstory for the Nazgul because the names at the moment don't mean anything. And it's just a bit of fun, isn't it? I think. So anyway, there we are. So that's for the Nazgul. Now, if you're playing as Gondor, the Nazgul will not be locked. So all 6, is it, that Mordor get, will come at you straight away. And if you're wondering where the 6th currently is, he's either in Barad-dûr or Urk-Estelad. I can't remember which. But he starts in a town. You start the game with 1 Nazgul in any event. So it's only these 5 that will return to you over time. When you are now not playing as Rune, moving over and changing to Rune, when you're not playing as Rune, their faction heir is teleported down to Varfest in an attempt to stop the regicide that Rune was very keen on committing against itself. So the faction leader will stay in Mistrand, but the heir will move down to Varfest and he'll occupy the castle down there, or I think he just moves next to it. He won't. That happens straight away at the very start of the game, not at turn 2. So he goes. Also, I can't think of the word. Lord of Lynx and Roher together have created a cool little script for Rune related around their dragon cult. So there's new traits and ancillaries and a little script applied that where the dragon cult go on a sponsored dragon artifact hunt. So you can obtain Scatha and Smaug's relics, and then you can obtain a dragon egg from the Withered Heath, which is all the way up here. It just gives you, there'll be some cool traits and ancillaries, there'll be some various effects to this, but there aren't any unit rewards. It's just a little RPG kind of thing for Rune. That seems very cool. So those are all of the specific evil changes. We'll now jump over to specific good changes, starting with Bree. When you are not playing as Bree, the same thing that happens with Rune happens for Bree. So your heir, what's he called? I can't remember. Ted, I think. Or Andy, I can't remember the name. Anyway, the heir is teleported to Mitchell Delving if Bree is being controlled by the AI. Just again, to move the possibility of regicide further down the line. Jumping over to the High Elves, through some scripting and coding magic, I was able to make it so that Lindar units are available straight away. There they are. Lindar Bowmen, Lindar Guards, Lindar Longspears. You may have noted that previously these units, because of the way that the script worked, they were unavailable at game start, and you had to wait for the replenishment, which is about 12 turns, which meant you could spend the first 12 to 15 turns not training anything. But now you can train the Lindar units straight away. The Noldor you cannot train straight away. That is by design, not by bug. But the Lindar you can. So that's pretty good for the High Elves. Also, Elrond, as we said, has been given his new strategy map model, courtesy of another mod. I believe Reforged, possibly Heirs of Elendil, actually. And to them we are grateful for getting his Hobbit design, because it does look a lot better than the robes he was wearing. Oh, let's just turn those off. You can see him easily. There we are. I always hated the robes, and it just looks so silly for someone to go into battle wearing robes. So now he actually has armor, so that's nice. So Elrond is now an actual general. Dorwinion has had some changes to its script. If you choose the humans, then an elven general will spawn at the point of the choice, and he will have one of every single elven unit. So you get at least to play with one of each of those units, but when they die, they're gone. They do not retrain. Similarly, if you choose the elves, you'll get a human general who will spawn, and he will have one of every human unit that you have now lost availability of. And so you get to fight with the units from the other one, even if you choose. But you won't be able to train the units from the other one, which a lot of people ask for. But if you were able to train the other side's units, the whole point of the choice script is void. And we may discuss in future, possibly, I mean, I can't rule anything out, but we'd have no plans to change the script anymore. We think it's fine as it is, and we like the choice. But a lot of people always say, oh, I really wish you'd be able to build a barracks in one town somewhere and train the units from there. But it totally negates the point of the script and the choice if you can just train the other side units. We might as well just do away with it altogether, which we don't want to do. But we can't rule anything out, and maybe a sort of hybrid elven-human monster will be created in Dorwinion in future, but then they'll lose a script, so I think it takes something away from them. Speaking of the choice, there's a few more text pop-ups now to just let you know what is actually going to happen. I realised that in version 3, you only get one message at about turn 50, and it's the choice. You then choose yes or no. Whereas now there's a couple of extra pop-ups that just explain a bit more about what the choice is, when it might happen, and so you're thinking about it before it actually happens. Also, Karasant has been moved one tile to the south so that you can now reach Santanwi in 2 turns, and vice versa. You don't, which is good. It used to annoy me that it took 3 to get over there, because it's the first turn will get you to about the halfway mark, and then the next turn gets you to about there, and then you have that one tile distance. It was so frustrating, but now you can do it in 2 turns, so that's good. Also, Ilanin has been moved to the south, and roads have been added to the region, which helps the AI Dorwinion in a lot. Ilanin used to be up here in this vast plain. It's now closer to the border with Dorwinion, which allows Dorwinion to claim it sooner. Jumping over to Gondor then, and another RPG sort of style script has been added for Denethor, and again it's related to traits and ancillaries, but it also affects you nationwide. So Denethor's Madness has been added, and or Denethor Palantir or Madness, call it what you will. It's a little script, and as the turns go by, Denethor obviously is battling mentally with against Sauron by using the Palantir, and generally he's falling into madness with the loss of Gondor and of course his sons. And so the death of Faramir or Boromir will massively speed up Denethor's descent into madness. And also, if Osgiliath is captured, then this also speeds up his descent. And also, just generally losing battles will have a negative effect on Denethor's mental state. And mental state, in this instance, is reflected by his ability to do things. So, when his mental state is at its worst, he will be a terrible battle commander, and he will be a terrible governor. He will be nothing but a blight for your nation, because he is exactly that. He's lost his nut, to be colloquial about it. And but in order to undo this, one must either defeat Mordor or, well, it's not really an or because it also defeats Mordor, destroy the ring. Because of course the madness of Denethor is locked and tied very much to the fate of Gondor, but therein, and by extension, the fate of Mordor. So Mordor's defeat, either by the ring or just in general, will then completely wipe the Denethor script altogether, and everyone will be returned to normal. And I say everyone because as Denethor descends into madness, your generals also become affected, disillusioned, if you will, at the fact that they're being led by a known and outward madman. So, in order to... Basically, the script is very manageable by simply not losing very many battles, don't lose Western or Eastern Osgiliath, and especially don't get Boromir or Faramir killed, because that will see then a big negative buff across all your generals as Denethor descends into madness. And that's the end of the specific good changes then. We now come to the just generic map changes. So a little bit of behind the scenes one to start with. The campaign script has been tidied up a little bit so that some factions had multiple bonuses and they were supposed to only trigger once, but I realised they were triggering a couple of times. Like, for example, King's Purse bonuses for certain factions were being increased twice rather than once. So I just went through the script and moved all of the expansion aspects of the script. So the turn 1 expansion, all of those are now in one place. All of the scripted effects that occur when you are a certain nation. So, for example, when you are playing as the Dwarves of Erebor, Gundabad get Onazanar in the turn 1 auto expansion. And all of those player-only expansions are now in one place as well. So, modifying and editing the campaign script file is now a little easier, and various erroneous bonuses have been removed. So as I say, you won't see much of a difference really on the campaign map, but if you edit DaC to any great extent, the campaign script's a bit easier to navigate now. I also included just little labels throughout the campaign script, and they're all listed at the top, so you can jump around the file much easier, because it is like 50, isn't it like 250,000 lines of text or something stupid? It's at least 50,000, I'm sure it's into 6 figures. So it's just easier to jump around it now for you modders out there. In the war between Isengard and Rohan, changes have come, and Ginyard is now a keep, and Foldberg is now a town, not a village. So it's a bit easier for Rohan to defend. Their balance between Rohan and Isengard, as ever, hangs on a knife blade. And at the moment, we're happy with where the balance is, and it should be quite difficult if you're playing as Rohan to fight off the storm that is Isengard. The Grey Company, the Guard of the Hand, Gil-galad's Company, and Balin's Guard, and Sauron's Bodyguard are all now 0 upkeep. This is because each of the units I've just listed are a single unit. They don't appear anywhere else except for the general they are the bodyguard of. So, of course, the Grey Company is Aragorn, the Guard of the Hand is Saruman, Gil-galad's Company is Elrond, Balin's Guard is Balin, and Sauron's Bodyguard is Sauron's Bodyguard. And each of those now have no upkeep whatsoever, so they are free all the time. Whether they are in a town or outside of a town, it makes no difference. It makes these generals very, very useful as leading armies, because, of course, they're now free. But the main reason is because they were never free. So rather than, if we made the unit able to be retrained in a town and thus get free upkeep in that town, that unit would then be rewarded to you as an event mission reward, which would break the immersion. You don't want 2 Sauron's bodyguards knocking around, or even 2 Balin's guards, for example. It just doesn't work. So instead, they are just free all the time. So Elrond is one such person, as I say, and their upkeep is now just 0. So very useful little generals there. The small UI icons have been reverted to these square designs because the quality of them is, in my opinion, better. In terms of the actual pixel quality, they don't look blurry. Also, I think it's nice to have these side be different from the main ones. But when we shrunk down these shields to then be represented on the side, as you'll see in, I think, my High Elf campaign and possibly my Dorwinian one, the quality was just absolutely lost and they looked atrocious. Whereas these simple squares reflect much better. Or are represented better, the quality is higher, and I just prefer them. I really like the simple one icon, no fancy frills, you know what you're looking at, and I like it. So they've been reverted. The Desert Resource, which is obviously one of the hidden resources and is in places like Pezasan, Haradrim Waste, which you can't even access. Oh no, yes you can, sorry, I'm thinking of the Wastelands. The Desert Resource has been renamed to Barren, so if you ever see it in a text, it's now Barren. It's been applied to various other locations, such as most of Mordor, except for, I believe, Nirn. Also places like Nmenor and the Brown Lands, and I think there's a couple of others, but that's generally it. Anyway, so Desert has now been replaced with Barren, but of course the biggest campaign map change is that units now are not at all affected by terrain types in their recruitment. So you are no longer slowed down by taking a certain province. Famously, of course, the worst offender for this was the High Elves. Previously, the High Elves could not train very fast in mountains, and it was something like 45 turn replenishment rate to train in mountains, which massively nerfed you because your nearest provinces are all mountains. So it made the High Elf campaign much harder. Of course, the High Elf campaign was changed a long time ago, and they actually preferred mountains, but now all of that is gone. So take whichever region you want, your troops will train the same. And the only defining feature about speed now is that castles are significantly better at training troops than towns. So castles have faster replenishment. Angstul is a castle, for example. They have faster replenishment, and in the later stages, this change is actually yet to come, but we're going to do it. In the later stages in castles, lower tier units will train with an experience bonus rather than faster. So towns will only ever train faster. They will never give experience bonuses, but castles will. So castles are always better recruitment options. So if you are if you're a nation that doesn't have access to a castle early doors, for example, like Lothlorien, and you're wondering, where should I expand? Oh, they do get a Draikhan, actually. And you're wondering where you should expand anyway. A castle might be a good option because you need somewhere to actually recruit troops. And castles are faster. So the terrain bonuses have gone. But the terrain bonuses are still reflected in the game through a cultural conversion bonus. So instead of your troops training faster in a terrain type you might like, your culture now increases faster in a terrain type you like, which is much better. It's much more thematic and realistic. So as Bree, for example, I think Bree are a grassland. So every nation has now been assigned one preferred terrain type, and in that terrain type they get a little bonus to their cultural conversion. It's only 1% bonus, but it's just enough to make it that feature reflected, if you will. But something that this does mean is that in the green books, the terrain bonuses will now not be listed at all. So I think I took it out of Mithlond. Yes, I did. So the capital ones will have this faction info. That is going to go into the game. But the terrains, none of the green books will now list terrain because it's only cultural conversion now, and it's a little minor bonus. And you'll note it because your artist studio will list the bonus twice. So Mithlond is a place where the elves like to live, so we get 2 culture increase bonuses listed together. So that's an indication that we're in our preferred terrain. It is only a very minor little bonus, and for most factions you can still know just by looking at the region what type of region it is. For example, Athelin is very obviously a grassland, there's hardly any forests, but Camath Bryn is a terrible example because it's one of 2. But somewhere like Argon, there's a majority forest there, so you know it's a forest region, things like that. And it will say in the green book what your preferred terrain is, but it just will no longer list the terrain types because it's a very minor feature. But the faction info will list it. I'm not sure if I mentioned the faction info in the last developer diary, so I will say that now. So the green book in your capital provinces, or your capital province and any that share it, will list any sort of unique features of your faction. You can see the recruitment there, and then it will go on to list any scripts that your faction takes part in, and it will tell you what you need to do. So if you don't want to spoil your scripts, then obviously just don't scroll down or only go as far as recruitment. But it will just give you an idea, because a lot of people said that scripts will pop up, they'll tell you what you need to do, then they'll disappear and you'll forget what you need to do. So the green books now tell you. Now, as I say, the green books are now shared out an awful lot more than they were before. There's not one per region. There's normally one book for about 5 different regions now, creating an area. So Linden, for example, is represented in Mithlond, in Harlond, in Forlond. I also think Perth and Loon has the Linden one, and possibly Undertowers does as well. So the faction capital for High Elves is, of course, Mithlond, but it will be displayed in any of those green books. So for most nations, if you do lose your capital, which is nigh on impossible, but if you do manage it, then there will be somewhere else that will tell you your scripts, or you'll just have to take back your capital in order to learn what your faction does. So that's the terrain changes. Corruption and Devastation now have a bigger impact than they did before, than they did in version 3. So governors, again, it's just making governors more important. And also Devastation is increased so that maintaining unity and cohesion throughout your realm is advised. If a rebel army is knocking around in your region, they will be costing you money. Whereas before it was really negligible. It was like 50 gold coins or something stupid. Whereas now it will be like 200 to 300 gold coins. It'll be the cost of an entire unit potentially being taken up by one little rebel standing in your region. So Devastation is more important. And Corruption. Corruption only affects you when your nation gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So Corruption is always listed at the very bottom there, Corruption and Other. So the High Elves, we're not particularly big. So our Corruption at the moment is 629. But as you get bigger, Corruption goes with you. And it was the method that Creative Assembly put in to try and stop ballooning empires. So as empires got absolutely massive and made tons of money, Corruption was a way to try and counter that, to try and stop the stack spam. Now, of course, in the base game, they failed absolutely, and the stack spam in Medieval 2 is totally a problem. And the only way to get rid of it would be to grind the game down to a real slow slog, and we don't want to do that. But anyway, Corruption is now more of a thing, but it's countered by governors. The distance to capital order bonus has also been implemented again, so previously it had absolutely no effect, whereas now it is a minor effect. If we go home and go to settlement details, the public order, this is a terrible example because that is our capital. Distance to capital, there we are. So distance to capital is now a thing. Your units, your towns will like you a little less the further they are from your heartlands. Which is, it's in there because the order was just totally irrelevant in this game, and we wanted to actually make order partly a thing, so we brought that in. Your governor now has, with the traits and ancillaries that Rohura's brought in, governors now play a much bigger part on the campaign map, and they will definitely maintain order at all times. Having a governor will automatically remove, will almost always automatically remove any kind of order bonuses. The governors are so strong at maintaining order, and it's an attempt to try and get you to have governors rather than before where they were just not necessary. But law buildings also now give a bigger bonus. So anywhere where it says it gives a bonus due to law, that 5% will not actually be 5%. It will likely be, I think it's 1.2 or 1.5 times. So whatever is actually shown there, the bonus is actually bigger than that by 1.5 or 1.2. I can't remember which it is. So it won't be 5%. It will be whatever that is, 7.5% or 1.6, I think. 6%, sorry. No, 5 point... I don't know. I can't be bothered to work out the maths. But anyway, the bonus to order, the law bonus is now the best way of maintaining order. So happiness is not as good as law is the point I'm trying to make here. Law always wins out. Helm's Deep has finally been repaired by RK and can now be attacked by 2 armies, and they will not bug out. There is only space for 2 armies, but both of them will be in front of the Hornburg, and both of them can attack the castle no trouble. There's also now a custom tile for the Hornburg, which I believe is the one just in front of it, which means if you are the defender of the Hornburg and you attack an army standing in front of you, again, the battle map will not be broken and you can fight no trouble. So the Hornburg is no longer a thorn in our side, which is nice. If you're playing as a good faction and you fail to get the 1 ring, you will not suffer massive debuffs or relation penalties with other good factions. In fact, they will no longer really care. Because why would they? No good faction, like, if you're the High Elves, for example, the Woodland Realm isn't absolutely counting on you to get the ring. Just, they don't even know that you know where it is. So why would they hate you if the ring returns to Sauron? It's not your fault. So the relation penalty thing is gone. You can now ignore the ring and your allies won't hate you for it at the end. The AI bonus garrison in Eastern Osgiliath has been increased to 5 units down from 3, which helps AI Gondor an awful lot more. And if you're playing as Gondor, you can defend Eastern Osgiliath a little bit easier. We're coming to the end of the campaign side, you'll be pleased to know. We'll be on the battle map soon. The mission rewards have now been changed up. So the mission reward that says do this and you'll get given a best unit, they now only reward 1 unit. They'll never give you 2, so you'll only ever get 1 of your best units if that's the reward. The Merchants Guild missions now give significantly more gold, so it's 300 up from 100 and 600 up from 200, so they're actually worth doing now. Blockading nearby ports will now no longer give a best unit reward. It will now normally give money or something to that effect. But blockading distant ports still does. So if it tasks you with blockading, say Umbar for example, and you're playing as Enid Wythe, then that will reward you with a best unit. But if it tells you to block Tharagrondost's port and you're playing as Enid Wythe, that will just give you some money. Taking rebel settlements had the same treatment, so taking a rebel settlement will only ever give you money, it won't give you units anymore, but taking an enemy faction settlement does give you units. And the gold reward for any mission that gives gold have been increased, and the annex settlement mission has been removed altogether, so you will never be asked to annex a settlement anymore. That one has gone. And then the last thing to cover are new campaign strategy models. Starting us off is Thorin's Halls, which you will note now blends a little bit better with the surrounding terrain, and has a nice little mountain peak atop it. And it just sort of does. If you're just passing by, hopefully you won't get motion sickness, but if you're just passing by, it no longer stands out as much as it did before. And this is felt even more at Fahamgathol, which also now has a custom CSM. And, oh, look at the horrible texture when there is no texture. That's bizarre, isn't it? It looks like a matrix that goes on forever. Fahamgathol obviously now also blends better with the mountain, as it's also got a new strategy map model. Finally, Mount Graham. Did I mention the Mount Graham change in the last developer diary? I can't remember. If I didn't, Mount Graham has moved, and it is no longer there, and it's no longer called Shadoon. It's now called Mount Graham. It has its own campaign strategy model, and it has its own battle map. No, I did show it, didn't I? Yes, I did. Anyway, that's where it is, and that's its now campaign strategy model, Mount Graham. Another peak sticking high into the air, because that is what Mount Graham is famous for, being one of the final peaks of this spur of the mountains. And it just, being in the middle, gives Angmar just a nice path down through the south. It was a very good idea to put that in the middle. It makes a lot of difference for Angmar. But that is the end of the campaign map changes. So we will now jump over to the battle map, where there's a lot of visuals. But I'm going to start by talking about some generic unit changes and changes to the sort of fighting in general. And then we'll look at the new visuals. Welcome then to the battle map changes. And we have got changes today for the Ardenaim, Gondor, Dole Amroth, the Anduin, the Woodland Realm, the Dunedain and Dale. But before we dig into the actual visual changes that are all standing before you, let us first talk about... No, actually, I tell you what, we'll go through all the changes, then we'll get the units to all fight each other, and then I'll go through the generic changes. So we'll start with the Ardenaim then. There's been quite a shake-up of their roster. Now, many changes you're about to see are all courtesy of Theoden and the Blood of Numenor mod, which is linked in the description below. You can go and have a look. I don't think it's actually available yet, which is why he's approached us and said, do you want these models? And we said, yes, we bloody do. They look amazing. So these are all from Theoden, and I'll mention when they are not. So starting off with the Ardenaim, a shake-up to their roster as well. So first of all, this is the new look for the Rosadan Footmen, and there they stand before, you know, I've muted the sound so they won't talk, I'm afraid, but this is from Theoden's mod, as I say. Now their upgrade has not yet been added, but for comparison, that is what they used to look like. So, sort of a blurry chainmail effect. They had the golden red sort of icon on their chest. Some of them had that fur-lined helmet. They had a bit more of an easterny theme, but now they have a bit more of a sort of ambiguous design. And of course, Sons of Numenor. But they are the Rosadan Footmen. They are still spear and shield, as you can see. If we move across, the Rosadan Crossbowmen have been changed to Bowmen. So the Rosadan, which is the first tier above your sort of pirate tier, your Azra Zaire, but which are your trash tier, there's no longer a crossbow at that level. Instead, they get standard bowmen, Rosadan bowmen, and that is... Oh, their upgrade has been... their model has been added, but an upgrade is yet to be worked on, but Hummingbird is going to create an upgrade for them. But there are the Rosadan bowmen. So they used to be crossbows, they are now bows. Next up, the Halberdiers, of course, the same visual upgrade, and that's what they used to look like. The helmets with the fins on, no one's been particularly pleased with that type of helmet, so you'll note a great change in that regard. But they just look nice, don't they? They just look good. It's a really crisp texturing, and They have a bit of a theme. They look like soldiers that fight in the desert, but they don't look like soldiers that come from the desert. And that's the point, because these people are supposed to hold their Numenorian heritage so dear that they wouldn't really wear something that they've taken from what they see as lesser races that they have lorded over now for thousands of years. So they maintain their Numenorian link without taking on the visuals of the lesser, lower folk. But that's what they used to look like, and that is them now. Next up, another big change, the Azrazair crossbowmen. So the Azrazair warriors, which was the only tier 2 Azrazair unit, or Corsair unit, which is probably a better name to give them when we're talking about them colloquially. That unit is gone, so the tier 2 sword and board Corsair unit is no longer available, and instead a crossbow unit has replaced it. So they are very much a replacement of the Azrazair, the Rosadan crossbowmen. And so they have very similar traits and effects, but it was felt that the sword and board one was totally superfluous, and a crossbow was better in that regard, and it helped having an archer at that tier as well, because otherwise your options were the absolutely outstanding Baruthiel's Rangers or trash archers. So there wasn't something in the middle, and there's no reason Numenorians or descendants of Numenorians should have poor archer choices. So those are the Azrazair crossbows. And again, the model is from Theoden's Blood of Numenor mod, and to him we are eternally grateful because they look fantastic. But speaking of things that look fantastic, this next one, if you're not enthused about this next one, then Med 2 has already, you've outgrown it, because this unit is sensational. Look at that. It looks absolutely fantastic. The masks just look so daunting. There's got the eagle wings representing, of course, because birds very much linked with Numenorian, not necessarily Numenorian, I suppose it's more Gondorian and Amrothian. But anyway, they've got wings on their helmets. They have gold and black as their theme, and this is, of course, the Naru and Aru Household Guard. These are your bodyguard units. But the model is so sweet and so nice that it is going to be used for all of the top tier Naru and Aru units, except, yes, so the two Naru and Aru, which is the Knight, the mounted version, and then there's also a standard spear version, I believe, and both of those are going to get this design. And the horse that the Knights ride will probably be edited to match, so it's not red when they're all wearing gold. But they just look fantastic. They're phenomenal. The Ar-Pharazôn's Faithful will retain the old visual design, so that the unit that this one used to look like will still be in the game, but it hasn't been given it yet, so I can't show you it. And finally, this is the change that I've spoken of and some will think controversial. Baruthiel's Rangers are no longer Rangers. Well, they are, but they now use crossbows, they don't use bows. And the controversial part, they fire flaming shots. Magically enhanced flaming shots, not by just lighting their bolts. It's something to do with the I can't make anything up, basically. But in the same way that the dragon cult have managed to work out a way to get dragon fire on their arrows, the men of Numenor, or the Ar-Adonayim, have done something similar, and their crossbows fire magically enhanced flaming bolts. But think up the backstory as you will. So they are, in all accounts, the same as they were before. They hide anywhere, they're rangers, they come from the same regions they came from before. They have a new design, as you can see, standing before you. But they now have crossbows. So they have slightly less range, but they have obviously much more hitting and punching power. And speaking of the flaming shots, the one unit from Rune, who I've not got on the map because there's no reason, the Daratai Hunters they are called, they no longer have a visual flaming shot. And that is because we wanted, now if you ever see a fire arrow fired at you, it will be a fire arrow. It will have a chance of setting your units alight, and it will cause fear and all the other rest of it, but it won't fire very slowly. Whereas previously, of course, the Daratai Hunters had a visual fire arrow, but it didn't actually have any fire effects, so that has changed. Next we come to Dale, and the Dale Woodsman, the Dalesmen, and the Rivermen have all again been given Theoden's models from the Blood of Numenor for his Dale units. So it's a much simpler design, but it's uniform across the board. So they all have this sort of, I don't know, Kievan Rus kind of vibe going on about them. And they were also renamed. They are now called Northmen Archers. The Rivermen kept their name, and Northmen Militia. Also, the Rivermen had a change, which I've written down. No, I didn't. I think it's the Rivermen. Yeah, because the others are archer mission. Yes, the Rivermen. They now have a spear when they go into melee, but they don't have a shield. So they are simple spearmen with no shield. But otherwise unchanged. It's just a visual change. And again, an upgraded version probably will be made by Hummingbird, but that will come in the future. So there is the brown early tier trash horde of Dale for you. And there you go. The bows are set up to work, flexing them nicely. Next, we should have the Dunedain standing over here. The Dunedain Steel Bowmen and the Dunedain Bodyguards have been given a visual upgrade courtesy of Theoden's mod again. So that is what the Dunedain Steel Bowmen look like before they are upgraded. As you can see, they're just like heavier versions of the standard Dunedain Bodyguard. But when they are upgraded, they now look amazing. There they are. They get full breastplates. They get a different style of helmet with the again seabird representation on it. And they've got chainmail on the bottom half instead of just tabards, or I assume, I don't know. Armor's never been something I'm all that bothered about. But they just look, there's an actual visual representation of their upgrade. And they look good. And the company, or not the company, the Bodyguard have had the same treatment. So crouching on your left, there's the Bodyguard in simple black leather attire. They're just black versions of the Dunedain Ranger model from 3rd Age Total War. But now they upgrade to get, again, plate across the board, and they just look vicious, don't they? And they look heavily upgraded. Now remember, these changes will only be applied in very, very late game. And in future versions, when we actually add the Reunited Kingdom, these changes, these upgrades will be locked behind the Reunited Kingdom upgrade. Next we come to Dole Amroth, who have had their Tirith Ayar Wardens changed. They are now a halberd unit, not a spear and shield. And the purpose of this change is to mean that all of Dole Amroth's armor-piercing comes from the Tirith Ayar. So I've put the knights here for representation. You can see they use maces. And the Tirith Ayar Wardens now use halberds, 2 armor-piercing units, and the only armor-piercing units for Dole Amroth, both coming from the Tirith Ayar, one single location. Next up, we come to Gondor, and a change that will make more sense when we come to the generic changes. But the Gondor Cavalry are now only a sword and shield unit, a melee fighter or an anti-cavalry unit. And Penneth Gellan Cavalry are now the dedicated lance unit for Gondor. And that will make a little bit more sense when I talk about some generic changes in just a moment. So there's the Penneth Gellan upgraded, and then behind them is the unupgraded, where they just wear simple green, and then they upgrade to have this sort of metal, these plate. It always looks good when you sweep forward along a line of horses, doesn't it? And also a change I've spoken about an awful lot. Lord of the Rings Conquest, the Blackroot Vale. So on the right-hand side is what the Blackroot Vale archers used to look like and will look like when you upgrade them at a blacksmith. But they start off looking like the archers from Lord of the Rings Conquest, and there they are. And they look sweet. Very nice indeed. Again, this is Theoden's Blood of Numenor mod. Scabbard on the back to obviously replicate the upgraded version. But there they are. So they have a white and blue and sort of browny theme, and then they upgrade to be just fully brown and grey. There is quite a stark change in their upgrade, so much that they look almost like different units, because they are, of course. But it's nice to have a visual upgrade. And the old unit is really good. So it's about trying to make units maximise the visual beautification of the mod where we can. There is someone else to talk about, isn't there? Yes, of course. They're out of order, that's why. That's disappointing. Are we at the Woodland Realm? Yes, we are. So the Hin-E-Dower of the Woodland Realm, standing here behind them, have also taken a look from Theoden's Blood of Numenor mod. So the Hin-E-Dower now use this model from the Blood of Numenor. And they are, of course, the best arch unit in the game, depending on how you line up the statistics. So that was them. But their old model has been given over to the Anduin, who I believe are either over there or hiding in plain sight. No, there they are. So the old Hin-E-Dower model, which is this unit here, that is now the Anduin Sylvan March Wardens unit. So it has a much, much better design because that unit looks really nice. So again, these ones could have been kept as the Hin-E-Dower, and the other one could have become the March Warden, but we wanted to use Theoden's model because he's allowed us to use any model that we want. We just have to ask him to package them up and send them over. So we've all had a little look through the catalogue, if you will, and there's just so many beautiful things. So I'm sure you'll see more from Theoden's mod as time goes on. Now, let's hand all of this over to the AI and set it back up to ×1. And we will speed up for a moment, wait till someone actually attacks someone, and then we will talk about some generic changes. Those ones over there look like they're spoiling for a fight, don't they? Yes, there we are. Right, so come out of time, go back down to like ×3 maybe. Yeah, that'll do. Deselect them and get rid of that. Right, there we are. I should probably cut bits like that out, but and well, no. Anyway, so generic changes to the battle as we slowly watch the Penneth Gellan cavalry march toward the Hinnidower. The gentleman who created the relentless animation for our two-handed units, his name is Jojo, and he has now created a one-handed relentless animation. So, by way of recap, relentless means that the unit cannot be staggered. If they are attacked by 20 units at once, they will still always be attacking someone, even whilst they are being attacked. They don't have a, I've taken a hit and I'm stunned. They don't have that animation. And a one-handed version of that has now been added. 2. The Grey Company of the Dunedain, the Half-Trolls of Angmar, Sauron's Bodyguard, and Saruman's Bodyguard, which is called the Guard of the Hand. They are all now relentless, so they will not stagger. Also, the General's unit is also relentless, and by that I mean the actual General himself. So of course we don't have a General in custom battle, we only ever have captains, and we'll assume this little Citadel Guard man is our captain. So the actual battle model on the field that is your General for any faction that has a standard sized General, and by that I mean human sized, so dwarves, I'm afraid you're out. They are relentless, so your generals cannot be stun locked. They will fight on forever, which will now make generals actually quite good if they are attached to a very good unit, which is a nice little side effect. Also, because the half-trolls in testing with the relentless trait became absolute monsters, they have been reduced in both size, and their javelins are now body-piercing, but they only have 3 of them instead of 4 of them. So the half-trolls have taken a bit of a nerf to their overall fighting capacity because the relentless trait made them monsters. The AI as Isengard will now be able to train Nazkai out of Isengard after the barracks event, regardless of whether or not they've got the ring, so that you can actually fight against Nazkai, because previously you never really got to. So that's good. Also, the Nazkai's fire flasks now have a much wider radius effect. So they will hit more units, and they knock down units if they don't kill them. So the flask was made significantly stronger because previously it wasn't really actually doing anything. So it's been buffed. The Penneth Gellan are going for it. Lances down, men! Oh, I didn't realise they actually do the bobbing animation. It's interesting the things that you see when you play the game in slow-mo, isn't it? Next up, skirmishing. So any unit that would previously skirmish if it had a javelin. So this is not archers, this is only javelins, and I don't actually have any javelins to show you. But any javelin skirmishing unit will now never skirmish. So they won't start the game skirmishing if they are controlled by the AI, is a better way of explaining that. Let's keep the fighting up over here where the elves are getting smashed by the cavalry. And the reason for this is because the AI's battle thinking is that the javelins should always be used to target a certain type of unit, and in general that unit would be archers. So javelins would try and get in range of your archers, because of course we're only talking about the AI's control of the javelins, so they always try and get in range of your archers. But your archers, 9 times out of 10, will be at the back of your army behind your melee forces. So the javelins, being in skirmish mode, would get stuck in an endless loop whereby they would run towards your archers to try and throw their javelins at them. They'd get near to your melee troops, so they'd then retreat out of range of your melee troops. Once they're out of range, they'd go back to try and target your archers, and it would just continue ad infinitum. So the skirmishing troops were useless, and they could be run down by cavalry before they ever actually did anything. So, the AI now does not start in skirmish mode. Their javelin troops will not run away from you. Now, the AI does not have the ability to turn skirmish mode on, so it means that javelins will now never skirmish. The only exception to this, I believe, is the Grey Flood Raiders, which is the cavalry javelin unit for Enedwythe. They will still skirmish, because they're cavalry. And lastly then, the changes to cavalry is the final change. So what has happened is that Lance Cavalry has been made more effective as Lance Cavalry. So their initial attack, when they actually have their lances down, if we move over to wherever the Penneth Gellans are. Ah, they've already charged in. So their initial attack with their lance for across the board, so any lance cavalry unit has had its lance attack increased. It will do more damage in its initial charge. They then had to do considerably less damage with their sword and shield, whereas previously they would often do 1 for 1. So they might do 8 damage with their lance and 8 damage with their sword. They now do more damage with their lance, so for argument's sake they'll do 9 with their lance, but maybe only 6 with their sword. And it's to try and make lance cavalry again more of an actual thing, rather than blurring the lines and making melee cavalry totally useless. Prolonged melee, therefore, is a weakness for this lance cavalry rather than a boon. And the primary damage, as I say, of the lance has been affected. But in other melee cavalry, such as the Gondor cavalry, which now does not have a lance, they are unaffected. So their stats remain the same. The change is only for the lance units. Now, the point of melee cavalry, of course, in Medieval 2, melee cavalry doesn't really work because their hitbox is so large that even the most basic archer unit can absolutely smash them because they can be attacked by about 20 people at once, so they die quite easily. But melee cavalry really is designed to attack other cavalry. So melee cavalry now is very good at killing other lance cavalry. So that's more of their purpose. And also, because they are better in melee than lance cavalry, they can charge in against lesser units and take them down in sort of prolonged melee. You can leave them in prolonged melee for a bit longer and they won't do as bad as perhaps lance cavalry will. So those are the battle map changes, and that finally concludes this episode. So there's an awful lot to go through because there's been a shed load of changes. I do hope, though, that you enjoyed this overview, and I hope that you are looking forward to the next version of Divide and Conquer. I can give you something of a timetable because you all, of course, always ask when the next version is going to be released, and the answer to that will always officially be 7. But a timetable or a route planner is that, no timetable, but a route planner is very much, we are going to finish any of the High Elf polish. So the High Elves are basically done, but there might be 1 or 2 tweaks here and there. And we are going to add the Ered Luin ring script. And once the Ered Luin ring script is in, we will then edit the balance of that and sort that out, and then release the next version. So the Reunited Kingdom will not be in the next version, but the ring script will, and the ring script will be what is the catalyst, the triggering point for Divide and Conquer's release. So that is all we have yet to add. But for now, that'll be all. So thank you very much for watching, if indeed you have, and until we speak again, dear friends, Navarna den Peramad Melonin, and farewell.